The key was taped to Proverbs 11,000. Lorraine's handwriting beneath it, box 1847. Make them watch when you confront them. 18 months after her funeral, I stood in the vault at First National Bank, 3 leather-bound ledgers open on the viewing table. Columns in my wife's handwriting filled every page. Reported inventory, actual shipments, the difference, $1.87 million. My hands shook, but my mind was clear. I closed the ledger, reached for my phone. Quick favor, hit subscribe and comment your city and time. It helps the channel, and I love reading them. My name is Dale Winslow. I'm 58 years old, and I built Winslow Plumbing Supply with my hands, my back, and a 1986 Ford F-150 that burned a quart of oil every 1,000 miles. That first year, I slept in the truck bed more nights than I care to count. Rest stops, cold mornings, 4 a.m. starts. Parked along I-71, waking before dawn to make deliveries in Cleveland before the job sites opened. I had $3,200 saved from 3 years of construction work and a handshake deal with Jim Henderson at Henderson Brass. Jim was 62 then, white hair combed straight back, calluses on his palms that matched mine. He looked me over in his office, this kid in work boots and a clean shirt, asking for net 30 terms on copper fittings with no credit history and no collateral. "You got references?" he asked. I gave him 3 names. Contractors I'd worked for who paid on time and expected the same. Jim called all 3 while I sat there. 15 minutes of "yes, sir," and I appreciate that. And he does what now? Then he hung up, opened his desk drawer, and pulled out a purchase order pad. "I'm gonna extend you terms based on character," he said. "Don't make me regret it." I never did. 2 years later, I married Lorraine. She was working accounts receivable at a heating supply company in Columbus, and I met her when I walked into the wrong office looking for a delivery address. She had reading glasses on a chain around her neck and the kind of handwriting that made my chicken scratch look like a foreign language. Our first year of marriage, she ran the books from our kitchen table, an adding machine, a box of ledgers, and a filing cabinet we bought at a church rummage sale for $12. I drove routes across Ohio, Indiana, and Kentucky, 14-hour days, loading pipe at 5 in the morning, delivering until dark, then driving home to find Lorraine still at that table, reconciling invoices by lamplight. We were partners, not the corporate kind with contracts and equity splits, the real kind, the kind where one person handles what the other can't, and neither keeps score. The 1991 recession nearly killed us. Construction stopped across the Midwest. Contractors went bankrupt. Suppliers called in their lines. I had 7 employees by then, and every one of them had families. Lorraine and I sat at that kitchen table for 3 hours, running numbers. "We could cut payroll," she said. "That's the obvious move." How much would we save? Enough to make it through. Maybe. I looked at the payroll sheet. 7 names. 7 families. Frank Petty had just had his 2nd kid. Maria Gutierrez was putting her brother through community college. Tom Washburn's wife had cancer. What if I drove deliveries myself? I asked. "Cut the fuel costs. Eliminate the outside haulers. I take the routes personally." "You'd be gone 6 days a week." "I know." Lorraine took off her glasses and rubbed her eyes. She didn't argue. She understood what I was asking and what it would cost us both. For 18 months, I drove every delivery myself, left Monday morning, came home Saturday night. Lorraine ran the office, handled customers, kept the 7 employees busy with warehouse work and local jobs. We didn't lay off a single person. By 1993, construction was back. Our suppliers remembered who'd paid on time through the worst of it. Our customers remembered who'd shown up when other distributors had shuttered their doors. We grew. By 2020, Winslow Plumbing Supply operated out of 45,000 square feet of warehouse space in the Hilliard Industrial Corridor. 47 employees, regional distribution across 3 states, suppliers who still called me directly when they had overstocked deals because they knew I'd move product fast and pay faster. I had a philosophy about the work. Told it to anyone who'd listen, including my sons. Every pipe tells a story about who built it and who needed water, I'd say. That cast iron main under downtown Columbus? Installed? 890, still working. That's what we do. Kevin got his MBA at Ohio State. I paid $127,000 for that degree because I believed education could take the company places I couldn't reach. Modern finance, strategic planning, the language of business that I'd never learned to speak. Troy dropped out of college his junior year. I didn't yell, didn't lecture. I brought him into warehouse operations instead, teaching him inventory management and logistics the way Jim Henderson had taught me about supplier relationships. From the ground up. One evening, I took Kevin to my basement. I wanted to show him something. The climate-controlled room held my collection. Antique plumbing fixtures I'd gathered over 30 years, brass fittings from the 1920s, cast iron pipe sections with manufacturer stamps that hadn't existed in half a century, and my prize, a 350-pound clawfoot tub from the Waldorf Astoria Hotel's 1931 renovation. The dehumidifier hummed in the corner. "This is what I'm talking about," I told him. This tub was installed before the Depression, survived 2 world wars, outlasted every person who ever used it. 100 years from now, someone could restore it, and it would work exactly the same. Kevin looked around the room. His pale blue eyes moved from piece to piece without stopping. "Dad," he said, "this is a lot of capital sitting idle. Have you thought about liquidating? The vintage market is strong right now. We could reinvest in operations." "It's not inventory," I said. He shrugged. "Just a thought." He walked out. I stayed in that room for another hour, running my hand along the tub's rolled edge, wondering where I'd gone wrong. In November 2022, Lorraine's doctor found the tumor, pancreatic cancer. The doctors used words like aggressive and treatment options and quality of life. They gave her 8 to 12 months if we fought hard. I stopped going to the warehouse the next day. Kevin was CFO. Troy handled logistics. They could manage without me. I spent Lorraine's last 8 months at her side. Read to her when she couldn't focus on the pages herself. Drove her to chemo appointments and held her hand while the poison dripped into her veins. Managed her medications, her meals, her doctor's visits. Slept in a chair beside her bed because she couldn't stand to be alone at night. Kevin came to dinner every month. He'd bring financial reports, walk me through the numbers, explain operational details in language I used to understand. I signed whatever he put in front of me. "The business is solid, Dad," he'd say. "Focus on Mom. We've got this handled." I believed him. Lorraine died in November 2023. 200 people came to her funeral. Suppliers, employees, contractors we'd worked with for decades. 30 years of relationships filling the pews at St. Michael's. I sat in the front row. The pastor spoke. People sang. I watched the casket. Beverly, my sister, sat beside me, her hand on my arm. She was watching our family while I watched the casket. Later, she mentioned something at the reception, while I was accepting condolences from people whose names I couldn't remember. Kevin was on his phone during the eulogy, she said quietly. Troy couldn't look at the casket. They both left early, said they had urgent business. I nodded, said nothing. They're grieving, I told her. People handle it differently. Beverly's mouth tightened. She was a retired school principal. She'd spent 40 years reading teenagers who thought they could lie to her face. Maybe, she said. I didn't hear what she was really saying. After the funeral, I went to the warehouse once in 3 months. Kevin met me at the door, walked me through the floor, showed me the new inventory system he'd implemented. Everything's running smooth, Dad. The quarterly numbers are strong. You should take more time. Heal. I nodded and went home. I spent my days in the basement, surrounded by the collection, the pipes and fittings that outlasted the men who made them. Upstairs, Lorraine's Bible sat on her nightstand. I couldn't bring myself to move it, couldn't touch anything of hers. The monthly reports arrived. I signed them without reading. Kevin explained variances. I nodded at the right moments. My sons were running the family business. I had no reason to suspect otherwise. I didn't know that by the time Lorraine closed her eyes for the last time, Kevin and Troy had already stolen $1.87 million from the company my wife and I built with our hands. I didn't know she had spent her final months documenting every dollar, protecting me from a truth that would have destroyed whatever time we had left together. But Lorraine did. I learned all this later, piecing it together from Lorraine's ledgers and what Derek told investigators. But it started in February 2020. Kevin called a family meeting at the warehouse, something he'd never done in his 12 years with the company. He had PowerPoint slides. The conference table still had the same oak surface where Lorraine and I had negotiated our first supplier contracts 30 years earlier. Kevin stood at the front of the room, laptop connected to a projector I didn't know we owned. Dad, the industry is changing, he said. His pale blue eyes swept the room like a lecturer addressing students. We're running on systems designed for the 1990s. Paper invoices, manual inventory counts, spreadsheets that don't talk to each other. He clicked to the next slide. This is the Modernization Initiative, new accounting software, automated inventory tracking, a restructured chart of accounts that will give us real-time visibility into every aspect of operations. I looked at Lorraine. She sat to my left, reading glasses on, studying Kevin's slides, but the same expression she used when balancing a ledger that wouldn't reconcile. What's wrong with the current system? She asked. Kevin's smile tightened at the edges. Nothing's wrong with it, Mom. It's just outdated. We're leaving money on the table because we can't track efficiency metrics. We can't identify waste. We can't scale. The books balance, Lorraine said, every quarter. Kevin nodded. And I appreciate the work you've put in for 30 years. But we're not a pickup truck operation anymore. We're a regional distributor with 47 employees and 3-state coverage. We need infrastructure that matches our size. I watched my son present his case. The confidence, the business vocabulary, the slides with charts I couldn't interpret at a glance. This was what I'd paid $127,000 for. This was the future. What do you need from me? I asked. Kevin's posture changed. He moved to the next slide. Just your approval. I'll handle implementation. You won't have to learn a new system. I'll prepare executive summaries that show you everything you need in plain English. Lorraine removed her glasses. Kevin, I've been doing these books since before you were born. I'd like to understand how the new system works. Of course, Kevin said. I'll set up training sessions once we're live. He never did. Kevin installed the software in March. 3 consultants from the vendor spent 2 weeks installing servers, migrating data, running parallel systems. Kevin met with them daily. I signed the checks. $87,000 for software licensing, $34,000 for implementation, $12,000 for the first year of support. By April, the old system was gone. Kevin presented me with my first executive summary, a 2-page document with color-coded sections and a signature line at the bottom. Green means on target, he explained. Yellow means watch. Red means we need to talk. Right now, everything's green. I signed. I kept signing. What I didn't see, what I couldn't have seen, was what Kevin built behind the numbers. He started with the chart of accounts. The old system had 47 categories. Kevin's new structure had 312. Vendor payments split across departments. Inventory receipts coded by product type, supplier region, and delivery method. Overhead allocated by square footage, employee count, and seasonal adjustment factors. One afternoon, I sat down at his computer. Show me how to check copper spending last month. Kevin clicked through 7 different screens. See, you start in the accounts payable module, then filter by vendor category. But that only gives you invoiced amounts, not received inventory, so you have to cross-reference with the receiving module, which is sorted by date unless you change the view settings, and then you need to match the product codes because the system uses our internal SKUs while the suppliers use their own numbering. 15 minutes. Still no answer. I'll add it to your monthly summary, Kevin said. Detailed copper expenditure. No problem. The next month, the summary showed copper spending down 8% quarter over quarter. I had no way to verify the number. I had no way to verify anything. That was the point. Kevin upgraded the security cameras in June 2020. High-definition cameras at every loading dock, every aisle, every entrance and exit. This is about liability, he told me. Slip and fall claims. Theft prevention. Insurance companies love this stuff. We might even get a premium reduction. What he didn't mention was the retention policy. The new system kept footage for 30 days. Then, automatically deleted everything. Cost-effective storage management, the vendor called it. 30 days. Just long enough to seem reasonable, just short enough to destroy evidence of deliveries that never arrived. I found the shell company records in Lorraine's files, 18 months after her funeral, sitting in a bank vault with my hands shaking. But the companies themselves came into existence in August 2020. Midwest Supply Solutions, LLC. I found the registration in Lorraine's files. Principal address, a P.O. box in Worthington. Beneficial owner, hidden behind a registered agent service that charged $150 annually to keep names confidential. Central Ohio Logistics Partners, LLC. Same structure, same anonymity, same purpose. Kevin created them both in a single afternoon. The paperwork took 90 minutes. The first fraudulent invoice hit our accounts payable system in September. Midwest Supply Solutions, providing consulting services for inventory optimization. $23,400. Kevin approved the payment. The money wired to an account at a bank in Delaware where Kevin was the sole signatory. Within 48 hours, the funds moved again, split between Kevin's personal savings and a brokerage account he'd opened under a trust he controlled. Troy's involvement began with the receiving documents. My younger son worked the logistics side, coordinating deliveries, managing warehouse flow, supervising the dock crew. When Kevin needed someone to certify that shipments had arrived, Troy was already in position. The first falsified receipt documented a delivery of brass fittings from Henderson Brass. Invoice amount, $47,000. Delivery date, September 15, 2020. Received by Troy Winslow, Logistics Manager. Henderson Brass never shipped those fittings. Jim Henderson never received that order. The truck Troy claimed to have personally inspected never pulled into our loading dock. But the paperwork said otherwise, and the paperwork was all that mattered. I found out later, from Derek's composition notebook, how they recruited him. Derek Simmons, my warehouse supervisor, had worked for me for 15 years. Started as a dock worker, promoted to warehouse supervisor after his 3rd year. Good with inventory, good with the crew, never missed a day until his daughter Sarah was diagnosed. Spinal muscular atrophy, specialized therapy, 3 times weekly. Insurance covered half. The other half came to $1,500 monthly, and that was before the wheelchair modifications, the home accessibility renovations, the medications that weren't quite covered. Derek was drowning. I didn't know. He never asked for help, and I was too busy trusting my sons to notice the circles under his eyes. Troy approached him in October 2020, after the crew had left, in Derek's small office near the loading dock, where the security camera had a convenient blind spot. "I know about Sarah," Troy said. "I know what you're dealing with." Derek's throat tightened. He told me later, after he'd flipped, after the immunity agreement was signed and the FBI had his notebook. He said he knew something was wrong the moment Troy sat down. "I can help," Troy continued. $2,000 a month, cash. All you have to do is sign some paperwork when I bring it to you. Don't ask questions. Don't tell anyone." Derek should have said no. He knew that. He told me he knew that, sitting across from me in the warehouse where he'd spent 15 years, tears running down his face. But he thought about Sarah. He thought about the therapy she needed. He thought about the collection notices piling up on his kitchen counter. He took the money. For 2 years, the scheme ran without detection. Kevin generated purchase orders. Troy signed receiving documents. Derek verified the false deliveries with his supervisor's stamp. The money flowed through the shell companies and into accounts I never knew existed. Kevin's lifestyle changed gradually enough that I didn't notice. The Italian loafers replaced his ordinary dress shoes. The designer watches appeared on his wrist, one at a time, explained away as gifts from a client or good deals from a friend. His kitchen renovation, $15,000 of marble countertops and professional-grade appliances, he attributed to a home equity loan. Troy's changes were harder to see because he was falling apart instead of rising up. The gambling started with sports betting, 50 on the Browns, 100 on the Buckeyes. His phone showed scores instead of inventory reports. His eyes stopped meeting mine during our monthly dinners. By the end of 2021, Troy owed $340,000 to people who didn't send collection notices. They sent men to his house at 2 in the morning. They knew where his daughter went to school. They knew Derek's address. Troy needed the scheme to continue. Kevin needed it to fund his image of success. Neither of them could stop. The credit line was my emergency reserve, $500,000. untouched since I'd established it in 1998. It was meant for recessions, natural disasters, the kind of unforeseen catastrophes that could destroy a business overnight. Kevin started drawing on it in early 2022. Small amounts at first, $15,000 here, $30,000 there. Cash flow timing, he explained. Receivables are lagging. Customers are paying slow. The line crept upward. $100,000, $200,000, $350,000. By the time Lorraine noticed the first discrepancy, the company was bleeding from wounds I couldn't see. She found it in August 2020. A Henderson brass shipment billed at $47,000. Invoice dated July 15. Product code for copper elbows and brass tees. Receiving document signed by Troy, certified by Derek. Lorraine went to the warehouse floor. She walked every aisle. She checked every shelf. The shipment wasn't there. She called Henderson Brass that evening. After I'd gone to bed, Jim Henderson answered on the third ring. "Jim, it's Lorraine Winslow. I have a question about an invoice." Jim was confused. "Lorraine, we haven't shipped to Winslow in 8 months. Kevin said you were consolidating vendors. Said he'd found a better price out of Pennsylvania." Lorraine thanked him. She hung up. She didn't wake me. She didn't confront Kevin. She didn't call the police. Instead, she opened a leather-bound ledger, the same kind she'd used when we ran the company from our kitchen table. And she began to write. Reported 47,000, Henderson brass fittings, July 15. Actual, no shipment. Confirmed by J. Henderson, August 12. She made another call the next morning. Mitchell Crane, a man I'd served with at Fort Benning in 1988. A rope bridge had collapsed during training. Mitchell fell. I caught his harness. He'd told me a dozen times over the years that he owed me his life. Now he worked forensic accounting for the Ohio Attorney General's office, specialized in fraud investigation, knew the evidence standards prosecutors needed to convict. Lorraine sent him copies of everything by certified mail. The ledgers, the invoices, the bank statements she'd quietly obtained through her contacts at First National. "Don't confront them," Mitchell told her. "Document everything. Build the case. When Dale's ready, call me." Lorraine knew she wouldn't be alive when I was ready. 2 weeks later, she collapsed in the kitchen. The doctors found the tumor that same afternoon. She spent her final 8 months watching Kevin present falsified reports at our monthly dinners. She spent them listening to Troy's nervous laughter and seeing the guilt he couldn't hide. She spent them writing in her ledgers after I fell asleep, adding entry after entry, building the weapon she couldn't wield herself. Her final tally, $1.87 million. The week before she died, she rented Safe Deposit Box 1847 at First National Bank. Raymond Oates, the bank manager who'd known us for 30 years, processed the paperwork personally. She placed 3 leather-bound ledgers inside. She placed a sealed envelope addressed to me. Then she drove home, found her grandmother's Bible on her nightstand, and taped a small brass key to the page for Proverbs 11:1. A false balance is an abomination to the Lord, but a just weight is his delight. Her handwriting beneath Box 1847. Make them watch when you confront them. She closed the Bible. She never spoke of it again. 4 months before I opened Lorraine's safe deposit box, the phone rang at 7:42 in the morning. I was standing at the kitchen counter, coffee in hand, staring at the backyard where she used to plant tomatoes every spring. The garden had gone to weeds. I hadn't touched it. Dale, it's Raymond Oates. Raymond had managed First National's main branch for 18 years. We'd done business together since before Kevin was born. Morning, Raymond. Dale, I need to talk to you about something. His voice carried the careful weight of a man delivering news he didn't want to deliver. It's about your business credit line. I set down my coffee. What about it? It's maxed. 500,000. And the interest payments are 3 months overdue. I thought you should hear it from me before it goes to collections. The kitchen went quiet. Outside, a cardinal landed on the fence where Lorraine used to scatter seed. Raymond, I signed off on Kevin's reports last month. Everything looked green. I don't know what reports you're looking at, Dale, but the line hit its limit in October. We've been sending notices to the business address. I thanked him, said I'd look into it, hung up. For a long moment I stood there, phone still in my hand, thinking about what Kevin had told me at dinner 3 weeks ago. Cash flow is strong. Receivables are healthy. Nothing to worry about. I hadn't looked at a raw bank statement in over a year. Hadn't questioned a single number Kevin put in front of me. I'd signed his summaries and gone back to sitting in my basement, surrounded by pipe fittings that outlasted the men who made them. And I'd let my sons run the company. My jaw tightened. I set down the coffee and didn't pick it up again. I drove to the warehouse. The Hilliard Industrial Corridor hadn't changed. Same strip of distribution centers and manufacturing plants. Same truck traffic on the access roads. But pulling into my old parking spot near the loading dock, I had to check the sign on the building to confirm I was in the right place. The front entrance buzzed me through. Maria Gutierrez, my receptionist of 11 years, looked up from her desk, surprise flickering across her face before she smoothed it into professionalism. Mr. Winslow, I didn't know you were coming in today. Neither did I. I walked through the main warehouse. 30-foot ceilings, floor-to-ceiling pipe racks stretching back into fluorescent distance. The familiar smell of metal and cardboard and machine oil. Section C, the copper inventory, should have been stacked 6 pallets deep, according to Kevin's last report. I counted 3. Section F, the brass fittings, showed gaps where full shelves should have been. The numbers I'd signed off on didn't match what my eyes were seeing. I found Kevin in his corner office overlooking the warehouse floor. Glass walls, expensive desk, a leather chair that probably cost more than my first truck. The air conditioning hummed, too cold, too sterile. Behind him, shelves of first edition business books arranged spine out by color. I'd never seen him read one. Dad. He stood up, smoothing his tie. I didn't know you were coming in. If you'd called, I could have prepared a briefing. I don't want a briefing. Kevin's pale blue eyes darted toward the door, then back to me. He smiled, but it didn't reach those eyes. Of course. What can I help you with? The credit line. It's maxed. Kevin nodded, settling back into his chair with practiced calm. Right. I was going to bring that up at our next dinner. We're experiencing some operational liquidity challenges. He paused, watching my face. Receivables are lagging, he continued. And with the current market disruption, we've had to leverage our credit position to maintain inventory flow. I stood in the doorway and watched my son talk. Strategic debt positioning, he said. Working capital optimization. Another pause. I said nothing. Cash conversion cycle management. I'd negotiated 1,000 supplier contracts in my life, sat across from men who were trying to squeeze better terms, hide defects, shift blame. I knew what it looked like when someone was filling silence with words to avoid answering a question. Kevin, I said when he paused for breath, I want to see the books. His hands went still on the desk. Of course, let me put together an executive summary. The raw data is pretty complex with the new system. I don't want a summary. I want the actual numbers, bank statements, payables, receivables. Dad. His smile thinned. You wouldn't understand the new chart of accounts. It's structured for operational efficiency, not manual review. That's why I prepare the summaries. You're telling me I can't understand my own company's books. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying the data requires context. Let me schedule a meeting next week. I'll walk you through everything. I looked at my son, the Italian loafers, the designer watch, the practiced confidence of a man who'd spent 12 years learning how to sound smart without saying anything. I'll be back next week, I said. Kevin's posture relaxed. Good. I'll have everything ready. I drove home without stopping, parked in the driveway, sat there for 10 minutes, hands on the wheel, thinking. Then I went inside and found my old Rolodex in the basement office. The cards were yellowed, the rubber bands cracked, but Jim Henderson's number was still there, written in my own hand 35 years ago. I dialed. Winslow. Jim's voice hadn't changed. Same Ohio drawl, same warmth. 35 years collapsed into 3 seconds. Good to hear from you, Dale. How you holding up? Getting by. Listen, Jim, I need to verify something. Shoot. Kevin's reports show a shipment from you last quarter. Brass fittings. Invoice around $47,000. Can you confirm that? The silence on the other end lasted 3 seconds. Dale, we haven't shipped to Winslow in 8 months. I wrote the date on a scrap of paper. March. 8 months ago. What? Kevin called me back in March. Said you were consolidating vendors. Found a better price out of Pennsylvania. I thought it was strange, you and I going back so far, but he said it was your decision. I didn't make that decision, Jim. Another pause. Well, that's concerning. I thanked him. We talked for another minute about nothing in particular. Then I hung up and sat in my basement surrounded by my collection. A Henderson brass faucet from 1947 sat on the shelf nearest me, its chrome still polished after 70 years. I'd bought it at an estate sale in Toledo. The couple who owned it had been married for 53 years. Their children had sold everything within a week of the funeral. I thought about what Jim had told me. 8 months. No shipments. But Kevin's report showed Henderson Brass as a major supplier. 47,000 last quarter alone. I ran numbers in my head. 8 months of phantom shipments. 47,000 each. The math wasn't hard. Where did the money go? I stayed in that room until midnight. Didn't eat. Didn't turn on the lights upstairs. Just sat with the question, turning it over like a pipe fitting I was testing for cracks. My sons, my company, Lorraine's life work and mine. The phone rang the next morning. I'd slept in the recliner in the basement, neck stiff, coffee cold on the workbench beside me. Dale, it's Raymond Oates again. Morning. Listen, I'm calling about something else today. Routine matter. The annual fee on a safe deposit box is coming due, and I wanted to confirm you're renewing. I don't have a safe deposit box, Raymond. Not under your name. Under Lorraine's? The basement went quiet. Even the hum of the dehumidifier seemed to fade. I didn't know Lorraine had a separate box. She rented it in her final days. Box 1947. I processed the paperwork myself. I assumed you knew. I didn't. Raymond cleared his throat. There's something else you should know. After her passing, someone tried to access that box. Twice, actually. Who? Kevin. The name hung in the silence between us. I turned him away both times, Raymond continued. Lorraine specified that only she or you could access it. Your son wasn't on the authorization. When was this? First time was 2 months after the funeral. Second time was in February. I thanked Raymond, told him I'd be in to look at the box, hung up. Her final days. That meant Lorraine rented the box just before her death. Right around the time she would have finished documenting whatever she'd found in the books, Kevin tried to access it. Twice. Got turned away because his name wasn't on the authorization. What did my wife put in that box that my son wanted to destroy? I climbed the stairs from the basement, walked through the kitchen, where Lorraine used to make coffee at 5 in the morning, past the living room where we'd watched our sons open Christmas presents 30 years ago, up to our bedroom where nothing had changed since November 2023. Her nightstand sat exactly where it had always been, reading glasses on the surface, a glass of water evaporated and dust-rimmed, the lamp she'd used when her eyes got too tired for overhead lights, and her Bible. I'd walked past that nightstand 1,000 times in the last 14 months. Couldn't bring myself to disturb it. Couldn't move her things because moving them meant accepting she was gone. I picked up the Bible now. The leather cover was soft from decades of handling. Her grandmother had given it to her at confirmation, her maiden name still embossed in faded gold. I opened it to the ribbon bookmark. Proverbs 11,001. A false balance is an abomination to the Lord, but a just weight is his delight. A small brass key was taped to the page. Beneath it, in Lorraine's handwriting, box 1847. Make them watch when you confront them. I held the key in my palm, cold metal. Small enough to overlook, important enough that my wife had hidden it in the last place she knew I'd eventually look. She'd known. Before the cancer took her voice, before the morphine clouded her eyes. She'd known what our sons were doing, and she'd prepared this for me. I closed the Bible and drove to First National Bank. The vault room at First National smelled like old paper and cold metal. Raymond Oates walked beside me, his leather shoes clicking against the marble floor in a rhythm that matched my pulse. Neither of us spoke. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting everything in flat institutional white. Raymond had been at the front desk when I walked in. He took one look at my face and didn't ask questions. Just nodded and retrieved his master key from the drawer. Now we stood before the wall of safe deposit boxes. Hundreds of identical brass doors, each one holding someone's secrets. Box 1047 sat in the back corner, away from the main viewing area. She specifically asked for a box back here, Raymond said quietly, away from foot traffic. Said she needed space to think. I fitted the small brass key into the lock. Raymond inserted the bank's master key beside it. 2 turns. The door swung open. The box was heavier than I expected. I carried it to the private viewing room, a small space with a single table and a chair. Raymond stood in the doorway. Take all the time you need, Dale. He paused. I'll be at my desk if you need anything. The door closed behind him with a soft click. I sat down and looked at the box. Gray metal, scratched from decades of use. My wife had put something inside this container during the last weeks of her life, something important enough that she'd hidden the key in her Bible and made Kevin try twice to get at it. I lifted the lid. 3 leather-bound ledgers lay stacked neatly inside. the same kind Lorraine had used for company books since we started the business. Beside them, a sealed envelope with my name written across the front in her handwriting. To Dale, when you're ready. I set the envelope aside. Started with the ledgers. The first one opened to a title page. Inventory analysis, 2020-2023. Lorraine's precise accountant's hand. Below the title, a simple instruction. Compare column by column. Trust your eyes. I turned the page. 2 columns ran down the left side. Reported. Actual. The first entry was dated September 2020. Henderson brass fittings. Reported $47,000. Actual $0. Confirmed by J. Henderson, August 12, 2022. And the next. Page after page of phantom inventory. Shipments that never arrived. Payments that went somewhere other than suppliers. 14 pages. 47 entries. Everyone documented with supplier confirmation calls and bank records. The running total at the bottom of each page climbed higher. $200,000. $500,000. $890,000. The final page showed the sum, $1,870,000. $1.87 million. Stolen from the company Lorraine and I had built with 14-hour days and cold nights in the back of a pickup truck. I set the first ledger aside, opened the second. This one tracked money movement, wire transfers from Winslow Plumbing Supply to 2 companies I'd never heard of, Midwest Supply Solutions, LLC, Central Ohio Logistics Partners, LLC, date, amount, receiving account, and then in a separate column where the money went next, Kevin Winslow, personal savings, First National Bank, Troy Winslow brokerage account, Fidelity Investments. The timestamps showed the pattern. Company pays vendor. Within 48 hours, money moves from vendor to my sons. Every payment, every transfer, every theft. I closed the second ledger. My hands had stopped shaking. Something cold had settled in their place. The third ledger was different. No columns, no accounting entries, just dates and observations in Lorraine's handwriting. August 12, 2022. Called Henderson Brass about July shipment. Jim Henderson says they haven't shipped to us in 8 months. Kevin told them we consolidated vendors. I said nothing. Need to verify more. I turned the page. August 20, 2022. Checked receiving logs against supplier confirmations. 14 discrepancies this quarter alone. Troy's signature on every receiving document. Another page. September 3rd, 2022. Derek Simmons won't meet my eyes. Something's wrong. His daughter's medical bills. I've seen the worry in his face for months. Connected? I read on, entry after entry. My wife's investigation unfolding across the pages like a detective's case file. October 15th, 2022. Kevin's new watch. Italian loafers. Kitchen renovation. His salary hasn't changed. Where is the money coming from? November 7, 22. Troy drinking at the funeral home. His hands shook when he signed the guest book. He can't look at me. He knows I know. November 8, 2022. My diagnosis came today. Pancreatic. The doctor said 8 to 12 months. Dale doesn't know about any of this. He can't. Not now. I stopped reading. Set the ledger down. The vault room was silent. The fluorescent lights hummed. Somewhere beyond the walls, the bank went about its business. I sat with my wife's words in front of me, written during the months when she was dying. She had known. While I was holding her hand through chemotherapy, while I was reading to her when she couldn't focus, while I was managing her medications and sleeping in a chair by her bed, she had known what our sons were doing, and she had chosen to protect me from it. I picked up the ledger again, found the entry that stopped me. Cold, December 18, 2022. Sent copies to Mitchell Crane. Everything. The ledgers, the wire records, the vendor confirmations. Mitchell Crane, my army buddy from Fort Benning. The man whose life I'd saved when a rope bridge collapsed during training, now a forensic accountant with the state. Lorraine had reached out to him, had prepared everything, had built the weapon and hidden it where I would find it when I was ready to fight. I opened the sealed envelope, 4 pages, front and back, her handwriting smaller than usual, as if she was trying to fit everything she needed to say. Dear Dale, if you're reading this, I'm gone and you found the key. I'm sorry I couldn't tell you while I was alive. I tried to find the right moment. But every time I looked at you, I saw the man who drove deliveries through the 1991 recession so he wouldn't have to lay off a single employee. I saw the man who spent 8 months at my side when he could have been running his company. I couldn't take that from you. Our time was too short. What you've read in the ledgers is true. Kevin and Troy have been stealing from us for 3 years. By my count, $1.87 million. The shell companies are Kevin's. The receiving documents are Troy's. Derek Simmons is involved, but I believe he was coerced. His daughter's medical bills made him vulnerable. I've sent copies of everything to Mitchell Crane. He's a forensic accountant now, as you probably know. He's organized the evidence according to Ohio rules of evidence. The case is airtight. Mitchell is waiting for you to contact him. I know what you're thinking. How could our boys do this? The same boys who built forts in the backyard and came to you crying when they scraped their knees? I don't have an answer. I've spent months trying to understand. What I do know is this. Kevin and Troy made choices. Adult choices. They chose to steal from their father while their mother was dying. They chose to exploit an employee with a sick child. They chose greed over family. I'm asking you to remember who they were, the boys we raised, the sons we loved, but I'm also asking you to hold accountable the men they became. You'll know what to do, Dale. You always have. From the first day I met you, walking into the wrong office with those work boots and that honest face, I knew you were a man who did what was right even when it cost him. This will cost you. I'm sorry for that, but a false balance is an abomination. A just weight is his delight. I love you. I will love you forever. Lorraine. I read the letter 3 times. Then I folded it carefully and put it back in the envelope. The viewing room had no windows, no sound from outside, just me and the evidence my dying wife had gathered because she loved me too much to let me spend her final months in pain, and loved our company too much to let our sons destroy it. I sat there for an hour, read every page of every ledger, made sure I understood the full scope of what Kevin and Troy had done. Then I gathered everything back into the box, told Raymond I was keeping the annual rental, and walked out to the parking lot. My truck sat in the corner space where I'd left it. I climbed in but didn't start the engine, just pulled out my phone and found Mitchell Crane's number. He answered on the second ring. Dale. Mitchell. A pause. I wondered when you'd find it. You knew? Lorraine sent me duplicates 8 months before she passed. Mitchell's voice was steady, professional. The voice of a man who'd been waiting 18 months to have this conversation. She asked me to wait until you came to me, said you'd know when you were ready. I looked at the bank entrance. Raymond Oates stood in the window, watching. What do you have? I asked. Everything. Wire transfers, shell company registrations, vendor confirmations. I've organized it according to Ohio rules of evidence, court admissible. The Franklin County prosecutor would have grounds to move on this tomorrow if you wanted. What are my options? Mitchell outlined them. Criminal prosecution, civil recovery, maximum sentences versus plea deals with restitution, prison time versus supervised release, the legal machinery of justice, laid out in terms I could understand. I listened. When he finished, I asked one question. Can I choose where they hear the charges? You mean the arraignment? That's up to the judge. But if you're asking whether you can be present when they're arrested, whether you can arrange for that to happen at a specific location? Mitchell paused. That's something we could discuss with the prosecutor. I thought about the warehouse. 30-foot ceilings, floor-to-ceiling pipe racks. The loading dock where Troy had signed receiving documents for shipments that never arrived. The corner office where Kevin had fed me lies in corporate jargon while wearing Italian loafers paid for with stolen money. I want them arrested at the warehouse, the same loading dock where they signed for shipments that never arrived. Mitchell was silent for a moment. I'll make some calls, he said. Come to my office tomorrow. Bring the originals. We'll build this together. I hung up, started the truck, pulled out of the parking lot. The drive home took 30 minutes. I didn't turn on the radio, didn't think about what came next. Just watched the road and felt the same focus I felt before a 14-hour delivery run in 1991. No emotion, just the next step. My sons had stolen nearly $2 million. My wife had died with that secret to protect me. She had trusted me to finish what she started. I would not disappoint her. I called Kevin on Tuesday morning, told him I wanted to discuss the company's future, told him to meet me at the warehouse Thursday at 3. Of course, Dad, I'll clear my schedule. I called Troy next. Same message, same time. Troy's voice cracked. Is everything okay? We'll talk Thursday, I said and hung up. Wednesday morning, I drove to Derek Simmons' house in Westerville, a modest ranch with a wheelchair ramp leading to the front door. The lawn needed mowing. The gutters needed cleaning. His daughter Sarah answered the door. 13 years old, seated in a power wheelchair, dark eyes looking up at me with the directness of a child who'd learned early that life wasn't fair. She'd been 8 when the diagnosis came. 5 years of therapy and equipment and bills that never stopped. Is your dad home? She wheeled back and called for him. Derek appeared from the kitchen, dish towel in his hands, face going pale when he saw me standing on his porch. Mr. Winslow, we need to talk, Derek. His shoulders dropped. He'd been waiting for this moment for 3 years. I sat at his kitchen table while Sarah watched cartoons in the next room. Derek's hands trembled as he poured coffee neither of us would drink. I know about the payments. $2,000 a month. The receiving documents you signed for shipments that never arrived. Derek's eyes closed. His jaw worked, but no words came. I also know about Sarah's medical bills, the therapy, the equipment. I know why you did it. He opened his eyes, looked at me for the first time since I'd walked in. Mr. Winslow, I never wanted. I held up my hand. Mitchell Crane had spoken with the prosecutor. The immunity terms were set. The Franklin County prosecutor has agreed to grant immunity in exchange for your full cooperation. Your testimony, your documentation. I have documentation, he said quickly. Everything, every payment, every document Troy asked me to sign, I kept it all. Show me. He led me to a filing cabinet in his daughter's room, hidden behind boxes of medical supplies. Pulled out a manila folder labeled Sarah Medical Records, 2024-2024. Inside was a black and white composition notebook. I opened it, dates, amounts, instructions, every bribe payment logged in Derek's careful handwriting. October 15th, $2,000. $2,000 cash. Troy said, sign receiving doc for Henderson brass shipment. No truck came. 3 years of entries. Irrefutable corroboration of Lorraine's ledgers. You'll need to be at the warehouse tomorrow, I told him. 3 o'clock. The prosecutor requires your presence as part of the cooperation agreement. Derek nodded. His voice thickened. I'm sorry, Mr. Winslow, for everything. I looked at the composition notebook in my hands. Then I looked at the doorway where Sarah's wheelchair had left marks on the frame from years of navigation. You made a choice, Derek. So did my sons. The difference is, you're going to help make it right. I called Beverly that night. My sister had been a school principal for 40 years before retiring. She'd spent her career reading teenagers who thought they could lie to her face. What's happening? She asked. You were right about Kevin and Troy. At the funeral. The way they acted. I should have listened. A long pause. I'll be there. Mitchell Crane arrived at my house at 8 Thursday morning with a leather briefcase and the focus of a man who'd been preparing for this moment for 18 months. Everything's ready, he said. The DA's office has a team standing by. Once you give the word, they'll move. Not until my sons hear it from me first. Mitchell nodded. He understood. Frank Petty met us at the warehouse at 2. 22 years he'd worked for Winslow Plumbing Supply. Started on the loading dock. Worked his way up to senior inventory specialist. He was the one who'd noticed discrepancies in the system but assumed computer errors. Mr. Winslow, I should have said something sooner. You didn't know, Frank. None of us did. But I saw the numbers. The receiving logs that didn't match the shelves. I thought the new software was glitching. I put my hand on his shoulder. You're here now. That's what counts. Kevin arrived at 2004-7. His BMW pulled into the reserved space near the front entrance. I watched from the warehouse floor as he walked through the glass doors, briefcase swinging, checking his watch as if he had somewhere more important to be. He wore a charcoal suit, Italian loafers, a watch that cost more than Frank Petty's monthly salary. He stopped at Maria's desk, said something that made her point toward the warehouse. I waited. Kevin pushed through the double doors and found me standing near Section C, the copper inventory. His eyes swept the space, taking in the pipe racks and shipping crates. Then he saw Beverly, Mitchell, Frank, Derek near the loading dock. His stride faltered. Dad, what's going on? Who are all these people? I didn't answer, just waited. Troy arrived 6 minutes later. He looked worse than Kevin had described in his quarterly reports. Dark circles under his eyes, clothes that hadn't been pressed, a tremor in his hands that he tried to hide by shoving them in his pockets. He saw the gathering and stopped cold. Dad? Over here, Troy. Each step slower than the last. His eyes found Derek near the loading dock and stopped moving forward entirely. When he finally reached us, his face had gone white. Kevin noticed his brother's reaction, noticed Derek. His pale blue eyes narrowed. "What is this?" I led them both to the center of the warehouse floor. 30-foot ceilings rose above us. Floor-to-ceiling pipe racks stretched in every direction. The smell of metal and machine oil hung in the air. A shipping crate sat between us. The same kind of crate where phantom deliveries were supposedly received and logged. Beverly stood near a forklift, arms crossed. Mitchell held his briefcase. Frank watched from the shadows between the racks. I placed 3 leather-bound ledgers on the shipping crate. "Your mother left these for me." Kevin's jaw tightened. "Dad, whatever this is about. She spent her last months documenting what you did instead of fighting with you about it." I opened the first ledger, turned to a page at random. Henderson Brass, $47,000. Reported received September 2020. Actual shipment, 0. Confirmed by Jim Henderson himself. His voice rose half an octave. "Those numbers are out of context. There are operational factors you don't understand. The new inventory system had integration issues." I closed the ledger. She wanted me to have peace with her, and she wanted you to face this. I reached into my jacket and produced Derek's composition notebook. "Your warehouse supervisor kept records too. Every payment, every falsified document. He's been cooperating with the Franklin County prosecutor since yesterday." Troy made a sound like something had broken inside his chest. His eyes found Derek near the loading dock. Derek couldn't meet his gaze. "Derek," Troy said, his voice cracked. "You were supposed to." "I didn't." Kevin said it would be fine. Troy's words tumbled out like water through a burst pipe. "He said you'd never find out." "I needed the money, Dad. You don't understand what they would have done to me, the people I owed. They knew where my daughter went to school. They came to my house at 2 in the morning." "Shut up, Troy." Kevin's voice cut like a blade. The brothers faced each other. Whatever alliance had held them together for 3 years shattered in that moment. Troy broken and confessing. Kevin calculating and cornered. I watched my sons. "I'm going to ask you one time, and I need you to understand." Kevin's pale blue eyes met mine. The confidence was gone. In its place, something I'd never seen before. Fear. "So think very carefully about whether you want to lie to your father's face." I waited. The warehouse was silent except for the hum of the ventilation system and the distant sounds of traffic on the access road. The cold concrete floor seemed to absorb every echo. Where did 18 months of phantom inventory go? Kevin's mouth opened, closed. His eyes darted to the exits, to Troy, to Mitchell's briefcase, to the ledgers on the crate. He was looking for an angle, a strategy, an MB, a vocabulary word that would make this go away. There was nothing. For the first time in his life, my oldest son had no words. I let the silence stretch. 5 seconds. 10. The man who'd talked his way through every challenge, who'd filled every uncomfortable pause with corporate jargon and strategic terminology, stood mute in the warehouse where he'd stolen nearly $2 million from his own father. I turned to Mitchell. "Call the DA's office. Tell them Dale Winslow has documentation on a $1.87 million embezzlement." Mitchell pulled out his phone. "And tell them my sons will hear the charges read right here, in the same warehouse where they committed the crime." Kevin's posture collapsed, not dramatically, just a slow deflation, like air leaving a tire. Troy was already crying, shoulders shaking, the guilt he'd carried for 3 years finally spilling over. Beverly watched it all without speaking. Her arms remained crossed, her expression the same one she'd worn for 40 years when a student sat in her office after being caught in a lie. Frank Petty stood in the shadows, seeing for the first time the scope of the discrepancies he'd noticed and dismissed. Derek remained near the loading dock, a man who'd traded his integrity for his daughter's medical care and was now paying the price. Mitchell spoke into his phone, gave the address, confirmed the documentation was ready. I looked at my sons, the boys who'd built forts in the backyard, the teenagers I'd taught to change oil and balance a checkbook, the men I'd trusted with Lorraine's life work and mine. Your mother asked me to remember who you were. I said quietly, the sons we raised, the boys we loved. Kevin's eyes dropped to the floor. He didn't look up again. But she also asked me to hold accountable the men you became. I picked up Lorraine's ledgers and held them against my chest. The DA's people will be here within the hour. You can wait in the break room, or you can wait here. Your choice. Neither of them moved. I walked past them through the warehouse floor where 47 employees had come to work every day, trusting that the Winslow name meant something. Past the receiving dock, where Troy had signed documents for shipments that never arrived. Past the corner office where Kevin had fed me lies while wearing shoes paid for with stolen money. Beverly fell into step beside me. I told you at the funeral, she said quietly. Something wasn't right. I nodded. You did. Are you okay? I thought about Lorraine, about the ledgers she'd kept while cancer ate her from the inside, about the key taped to Proverbs 11,001. A just wait is his delight. I will be, I told my sister. The Franklin County Prosecutor's Office moved faster than I expected. Within 72 hours of receiving Mitchell Crane's evidence package, Assistant District Attorney Elena Vasquez had opened a formal investigation. By the following Wednesday, she had subpoenas out to 3 banks and the registered agent service Kevin had used to hide ownership of his shell companies. Mitchell called me Thursday night. Arrest warrants issued this afternoon. They're moving Tuesday at 6 a.m. Both locations simultaneously. I thanked him, hung up, sat in my basement among the antique fixtures until midnight. Tuesday morning, I was awake at 5, coffee in hand, watching the sunrise through my kitchen window, the same way Lorraine used to watch it when she couldn't sleep. My phone buzzed at 6007. Kevin Winslow taken into custody. Troy Winslow in custody 10 minutes later, processing at Franklin County now. I learned the details later, from Mitchell's conversations with the arresting officers, from the prosecutor's file, from Beverly, who had contacts everywhere. Kevin's arrest happened in his kitchen. 6 days after the warehouse confrontation, officers found him standing at the counter in a bathrobe making toast. The only thing in that professional-grade kitchen he knew how to prepare. He didn't resist, didn't speak, just stared at the officers with those pale eyes while they read him his rights, then turned and walked to the squad car without looking back at the house. Troy's arrest was different. They found him in his garage at 6:08 a.m. He'd been there all night, according to the officers, sitting on a workbench, staring at something in the corner, the rocking chair, still under its tarp, still unfinished, still waiting for a mother who would never sit in it. Troy started crying before they finished reading the Miranda warning, kept crying through the handcuffs, through the walk to the car, through the drive downtown. The officer said he apologized 17 times during booking, to them, to the intake nurse, to a corrections officer named Martinez, who had no idea what he was apologizing for. Kevin refused to speak without an attorney present. Troy couldn't stop speaking. The news spread through Columbus like fire through dry grass. Winslow Plumbing Supply. 40 years of honest dealing. Dale Winslow, who drove his own deliveries during the 1991 recession rather than lay off a single employee. His sons had stolen $1.87 million while he grieved their mother. Suppliers called me that first week. Jim Henderson at Henderson Brass. Pete Markham at Midwest Pipe. Tom Riley at Columbus Fitting. All of them with the same message. Whatever you need, Dale, we're here. Kevin's defense attorney, a white-collar specialist named Gerald Hoffman, reviewed the evidence within 48 hours of the arrest. He was good. Expensive. The kind of lawyer who knew how to find procedural weaknesses and exploit documentation gaps. He found nothing. Lorraine's ledgers were meticulous. Mitchell's forensic analysis followed Ohio rules of evidence to the letter. Derek's composition notebook corroborated every entry. The shell company records, subpoenaed from the Registered Agent Service, showed Kevin as sole beneficial owner of both LLCs. Gerald Hoffman advised Kevin to seek a plea deal by Thursday. The preliminary hearing was scheduled for 3 weeks after the arrest. Courtroom 4B, Franklin County Courthouse. The same building where Lorraine and I had been married 42 years earlier. I wore the suit I'd worn to her funeral. Same tie, same shoes. The last time I'd worn it, I buried my wife. Now I was burying what my sons had become. The gallery held 60 seats. Everyone was filled. Beverly sat in the front row, arms crossed, the same expression she'd worn when students tried to lie to her face. Frank Petty was there, along with Maria Gutierrez, Tom Washburn, and a dozen other Winslow Plumbing employees who'd spent years trusting the company that Kevin and Troy had been hollowing out. Local business owners filled the remaining seats. Men and women who'd known my reputation for 4 decades. Who'd done handshake deals with me when handshakes still meant something. Kevin was brought in first. Orange jumpsuit, wrists shackled. The Italian loafers replaced by institutional slip-ons. His eyes swept the gallery once, then fixed on some point above the judge's bench and never moved again. Troy came next. He looked worse than Kevin, thinner, paler. His eyes found me in the gallery and stayed there. Oh, he mouthed something. It might have been sorry. I didn't respond. Judge Patricia Holbrook entered at precisely 9 o'clock. 63 years old, former prosecutor. A reputation for harsh sentences in cases involving family fraud. She reviewed the charges. Embezzlement in the first degree, wire fraud, money laundering through shell entities, criminal conspiracy, falsification of business records. The courtroom was silent except for the scratch of the clerk's pen. Assistant D. Vasquez presented the evidence summary. The phantom inventory scheme. The shell LLCs. The wire transfers that moved stolen money within 48 hours of each fraudulent payment. The $1.87 million total. Then she added something I hadn't known about until that moment. Your Honor, additional investigation has revealed that the defendants secured a $340,000 second mortgage on a property at Buckeye Lake using falsified company documents as collateral. The plaintiff was unaware of this mortgage until our investigation uncovered it. Judge Holbrook's expression tightened. The property's ownership status. Fraudulently obtained, Your Honor. We're seeking seizure. The lake house. Lorraine and I had bought it in 1994, summer weekends with the boys when they were young. Kevin learning to fish off the dock. Troy catching fireflies in mason jars. 25 years of family memories mortgaged without my knowledge to cover Troy's gambling debts. I watched Kevin's face when the seizure motion was read. Nothing, not a flicker. Troy's face crumpled. The hearing continued. Gerald Hoffman argued for reasonable bail, citing Kevin's community ties and lack of flight risk. Judge Holbrook set bail at $750,000. Kevin's assets were frozen. He couldn't pay. Troy's attorney, a younger man named David Chen, argued that his client had cooperated with investigators and had agreed to testify against his brother. Judge Holbrook set Troy's bail at $400,000. He couldn't pay either. Both of my sons remained in Franklin County Jail pending trial. The trial itself took 4 days. Kevin's defense centered on the complexity of modern accounting systems, operational misunderstandings, miscommunication between departments. The new software had integration issues. The shell companies were legitimate consulting arrangements that had been improperly documented. Gerald Hoffman was good. He created doubt where he could, questioned timestamps, challenged witness memory. Then Mitchell Crane took the stand. For 3 hours, he walked the jury through Lorraine's ledgers, page by page, entry by entry, the reported inventory that never arrived, the wire transfers that moved money to Kevin's personal accounts within 48 hours. He held up the shell company bank records. These documents show Kevin Winslow as the sole signatory on both accounts, Mitchell said. Every wire transfer from Winslow Plumbing Supply to these shell companies was followed within 48 hours by a transfer to Mr. Winslow's personal savings or brokerage accounts. The pattern is consistent across 47 transactions over 3 years. The defense attorney objected twice, both times overruled. And then Derek Simmons. Derek, testifying under his immunity agreement, described the bribe payments, the falsified receiving documents, the instructions Troy had given him. His voice broke twice during testimony. He looked at me once, briefly, then looked away. Troy took the stand on the 3rd day. He testified against Kevin, described the scheme in detail, admitted his role in falsifying documents, admitted taking money to cover gambling debts he'd hidden from everyone. Then his attorney asked him a question I hadn't expected. "Mr. Winslow, did you ever consider telling your father what was happening?" Troy's shoulders shook. He stared at his hands for a long moment. Every day, every single day. But I was too scared of what Kevin would do, of what Dad would think, of who I'd become. He looked up at me. "I'm sorry, Dad. I know it doesn't matter anymore, but I'm sorry." I nodded once, said nothing. The jury deliberated for 6 hours, guilty on all counts for Kevin Winslow, guilty on reduced charges for Troy Winslow, acknowledging his cooperation with the prosecution. Judge Holbrook scheduled sentencing for 2 weeks later. Kevin received 6 years in state prison, with possibility of parole after 4 years, contingent on full restitution cooperation. His shell companies were dissolved, his assets liquidated. The lake house was seized and would be sold, proceeds going toward restitution. 6 years. Kevin stared at the table, didn't blink. Troy received 3 years with possibility of early release for good behavior. His testimony against Kevin had counted for something. His genuine remorse, visible to everyone in the courtroom, had counted for more. Derek Simmons, per his immunity agreement, surrendered the $72,000 in bribe money he'd saved. He began working with Frank Petty to identify every falsified document in the system. The Columbus business community delivered its own judgment. Kevin's MBA network evaporated within a week of his conviction. I heard it from Jim Henderson, who'd run into one of Kevin's former golf partners at a trade show. The men who'd traded business cards with him at networking events, who'd invited him to golf outings and industry conferences, stopped returning calls. His country club membership was quietly revoked. His name disappeared from the alumni newsletter. Troy's ex-wife, Melissa, drove to the prison 3 days after sentencing, not to visit, to tell him what she'd told their children. "Your father stole money from his own dad while your grandmother was dying," she said afterward, when Beverly asked her about the visit. They needed to know the truth. They deserved to know who he really is. The whisper network that had started at Lorraine's funeral completed its work. Pete Markham mentioned it at a supplier meeting the following month. "Did you hear about the Winslow boys?" he said to a vendor from Cleveland. Left their mother's funeral reception early for urgent business. The urgent business was stealing from their grieving father. The numbers spread. $1.87 million. 3 years of theft. The lake house mortgaged behind his back. I heard versions of it for months. At supplier meetings, at industry events, at the hardware store and the coffee shop and the bank. I didn't engage, didn't correct, didn't embellish. The facts were enough. 3 weeks after sentencing, I met with Frank Petty at the warehouse. "The company needs an interim operations manager," I told him. "Someone who knows the floor, knows the people, knows what actually moves through these racks versus what the computer says should be here." Frank's weathered face showed surprise. "Mr. Winslow, I'm just a warehouse guy. You've been here 22 years. You noticed discrepancies when nobody else did. You stayed loyal when you could have walked." I extended my hand. "The job's yours if you want it." Frank took my hand. His grip was firm. The grip of a man who'd spent 2 decades moving pipe and building relationships with customers and earning trust the same way I had, one delivery at a time. "I'll do my best, Mr. Winslow." That's all I've ever asked of anyone. The credit line took 3 weeks to restructure. Raymond Oates at First National helped expedite the paperwork. The $500,000 Kevin had maxed out was refinanced at 6%, down from the original 8.5%, the bank recognizing that Winslow Plumbing Supply under my direct management was a different risk profile than Winslow Plumbing Supply under my son's fraud. The lake house sold at auction for $285,000, less than it was worth, more than I'd expected given the circumstances. I didn't attend the auction, couldn't bear to watch strangers bid on 25 years of family memories. Beverly went instead, called me when it was over. "It's done," she said. "Some family from Cleveland bought it. They have 2 boys." I was sitting on my back porch when she called. The yard where Lorraine used to plant tomatoes had gone to weeds. I hadn't touched it since she died. "Maybe they'll make better memories there," I said. I drove to the warehouse that evening, after the employees had left, after the trucks had returned from their routes, after the loading dock lights had clicked off and the motion sensors had settled. I walked through the aisles, 30-foot ceilings above me, floor-to-ceiling pipe racks stretching into shadow, the smell of metal and cardboard and machine oil. Every pipe tells a story about who built it and who needed water. I stopped at Section C, Sauper Inventory. The shelves that should have been 6 pallets deep, according to Kevin's reports, but had held only 3. They held 6 now. Frank had been restocking for 3 weeks, rebuilding inventory levels, restoring what my sons had stripped away. I ran my hand along the nearest fitting. Cold metal, solid. The 47 employees still had jobs. The suppliers still had a reliable partner. The customers still had someone who would show up when other distributors closed their doors. On my way out, I stopped by the basement office where I kept overflow from my collection. The Henderson brass faucet from 1947 sat on the shelf nearest the door, its chrome still polished after 70 years. I bought it at an estate sale in Toledo. The couple who owned it had been married for 53 years. I picked it up, turned it over in my hands, set it back down. Winslow Plumbing Supply would survive. Lorraine had made sure of that. My story hitting different? Tap like and rate it from 1 to 10. Explain your score below. Thank you. 6 months after sentencing, I sat in my basement surrounded by the collection. The Waldorf Astoria tub sat under the display lights, its porcelain surface catching the warm glow. Brass fittings from the 1920s lined the shelves. A Henderson brass faucet from 1947 sat nearest me, its chrome still polished after 70 years. I held Lorraine's letter again. The paper had softened at the creases from being unfolded and refolded dozens of times since I found it in box 1947. She had given me the tools to protect everything we built, the evidence, the contacts, the documentation that would hold up in court, but she had left the choice to me. I still couldn't explain how the children we raised became the men who stole from us, but I had made peace with not knowing. Frank Petty's Friday call came at 4 like clockwork. Credit line restructured at 6%. Inventory at 94%. The Henderson brass order shipped on time. The 47 employees still came to work every morning, still loaded trucks, still made deliveries across 3 states. Winslow Plumbing Supply would outlast this. I drove to the state correctional facility on a Tuesday morning. Kevin had refused to see me. 3 requests. 3 refusals. His attorney said he needed time. I stopped asking. Troy said yes. First request. First yes. The prison workshop smelled like sawdust and wood stain. A table saw whined somewhere behind the industrial lights. A dozen inmates worked at stations along the walls, building furniture that would be sold at charity auctions. Troy stood at a bench in the corner. He'd lost weight. The orange jumpsuit hung loose on his frame. But his hands moved with a steadiness I hadn't seen in years. He was building a rocking chair. Cherry wood. The same design he'd started in his garage before Lorraine's diagnosis. The chair he'd covered with a tarp and couldn't bring himself to finish or destroy. Dad? His voice cracked. I walked to his station, looked at the chair. The joints were clean. The curves were smooth. Good work. It's for the chaplain's office, Troy said. He paused. I couldn't finish it for Mom. But I had to finish it for someone. I ran my hand along the armrest. The wood was warm from his sanding. She would have liked it. Troy's eyes filled. He didn't speak. You doing okay in here? I asked. Better than I deserve, he said. I stayed for 20 minutes. We didn't talk about the trial. Didn't talk about Kevin. Didn't talk about what came next. Just stood together in that workshop, watching sawdust settle in the light. When I left, Troy was sanding the seat, his hands steady, his attention fixed on the grain. The drive home took 2 hours. I didn't turn on the radio. Back in my basement, I opened Lorraine's Bible to the ribbon bookmark, Proverbs 11,000. A false balance is an abomination to the Lord, but a just weight is his delight. I understood now. Kevin would serve his time. The debt would be paid. The law would have its due, but I visited Troy, watched him finish what he started, acknowledged the boy we raised, even as I held accountable the man he became. The tub sat solid in the corner. The brass fittings lined their shelves. Somewhere in Franklin County, 47 employees were loading trucks for tomorrow's routes. I set the letter on the workbench beside the Henderson brass faucet. Both of them built to last,